Welcome in everybody to an exclusive right here on Heat Ratio Live. I'm your host, Tony Cotillo, and always joined by some of the best writers in the business and reporters because this guy does it all. We're speaking to Ky Carlin. Make sure you follow him at Ky_Carlin. This guy's been in the Bahamas. He's actually at the Wells Fargo Center right now, getting ready for the preseason game, and he's dropping all kinds of knowledge on his X account. So make sure you check it in. But Ky, man, it's been a long time. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Tony. It has been a while. Thank you for having me on.
As always, man. You listen, I say this all the time. You hear me say it, I'll say it again. The beat reporter for any team is the hardest job in the world, and I respect the hell out of these guys for what they do. But I will say this, man, had to be a really cool time. You got to go to the Bahamas for for training camp. How fun is that?
I'll tell you what, it definitely beats Fort Collins, Colorado, where we had to go last year. But no, the Bahamas was fantastic. I didn't stay at the resort, the Atlantis resort. Obviously I went there for practice, but I wanted to kind of see the country a little bit. So I stayed in downtown Nassau. I got to go to the beach. I got to try some Bohemian food, Bohemian rum, all the while continuing to cover the team as best I can. The Bahamas was definitely one incredible experience, and I was so happy I was able to, be able to have that, type of experience with me.
That's awesome, man. I love it. I mean, listen, when you go to, towns that may be cold and damp and rainy, and now you're going to the Bahamas, man. It's a cool thing, especially like you say, you get to enjoy, the other end of your life too, man, because you do have a life besides this. But speaking of life, man, the Sixers, obviously we know the story off season. We know what happened. But what's your overall feeling with this team? Because I said last week, I think they're in a really good spot because you have the Phillies going on. You have all the stuff going on with the Eagles. Nobody's really talking about the Sixers, and sometimes that's good for them because the expectations and stress levels aren't as high.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, obviously the city is so wrapped up in the Phillies, and I mean they just had a hell of a game too win.
Ooh,
Shout out to Detroit Tiger legend Nick Castellanos. Um,
yes,
being able to pull that out for the Phillies in game two. And then obviously the Eagles are in full swing. Said that like not a lot of people are kind of, they kind of seem to forget that the Sixers are actually getting ready to start. Opening night is October 23rd. Obviously preseason game against New Zealand, getting ready to tip off. So it's going to be curious to see how the city kind of welcomes this team in because obviously Joel Embiid kind of is the poster child for like this city and the love they have for their sports and how hard Joel works and how hard he tries on an everyday basis. Then you got Tyrese Maxey, who's a rising star in this league. The huge addition of Paul George. Obviously, you can't talk about the Sixers without mentioning Paul George. That's a huge addition for Philadelphia going forward. But as they head into the new season, the big question is always going to be: are they going to be healthy come April? Because that is always derailed every single Sixer playoff run. It feels like in the Joel Embiid era. Was Joel going to be healthy? Is now Paul George going to be healthy? Because he's another one that has a play, an injury history. So
yep.
like those are the big questions that have to be figured out come April.
And that's a good point. I mean, it's like we say all the time. It's like unfortunately we say, is Joel and specifically is he going to make it? Is he going to be okay? Now it says, and you've seen him, and but you've seen him up close. I'm just seeing him on camera. It said he lost like 20 to 25 pounds, and he looks really good in shape. They have a plan for his knees and to keep him healthy. Are you seeing the same kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he came in on media day on September 30th, and he said, "Yeah, I've lost 25 to 30 pounds." Seeing him in the Bahamas at training camp, he looked lean.
Uh,
He didn't participate in scrimmages, which I guess is Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey and the trainers, the doctors who are their plan to make sure he's ready to go for the playoffs. That's the biggest thing, right? Because
yep.
nobody's going to care about him scrimmaging in October as long as he's ready to go in April. When the games matter the most in April, May, and June. So yeah, he didn't do any scrimmaging in training camp. I don't anticipate him playing too much in the preseason. Like maybe a game or two out of the six they have on the preseason schedule. So because the big goal is to get him ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, it's always the goal, and hopefully that continues to we continue to go down that positive path. Again, we're speaking to Ky Carlin. Make sure you're going to follow him at Ky_Carlin on X social formats. He covers the Sixers as editor of Sixers Wire for USA Today. He's all over the place. He's always online, popping with the biggest news and some of the news, Ky, about the offseason and wasn't just Paul George. It was bringing in specific pieces, like veteran pieces, like an Eric Gordon. We keep hearing the youngsters, the rise of Jarrett McCain. We hear a lot of things. I covered Ricky Council last year down at the G League and watched them excel up and knew that this kid was an absolute talent. I mean, just looking at those specific pieces, are we going to be a little more excited with some of these pieces coming off the bench instead this year?
I think so. I think one guy that you didn't mention was actually Reggie Jackson,
Yes.
um, a guy who they picked up. He was with the Denver Nuggets last year. He won a title with them in 2023. He got traded to the Charlotte Hornets. Then the Hornets, obviously, they're a rebuilding team. There's no really real need to keep him. They waived him. Philadelphia picked him up. So he's going to team up with Andre Drummond and probably form one of the better two-man games off the bench. A lot of people seem to forget those two were very dynamic in the pick and roll game with the Detroit Pistons. I mean, a lot of people forget that, they won 44 games, I think, in 2015-16 with Jackson and Drummond leading the way. They were an 8 seed in the playoffs and they got swept by the Cavs, but they gave LeBron James and the Cavs everything they could handle in that series. So I think the biggest thing for the Sixers, if you have Jackson and Drummond running things off your bench, which I'm sure Nick Nurse is going to want to have those two in tandem off the bench a good majority of the time. So I think that's going to be something to really watch about the preseason, something to watch all throughout the regular season, and it's kind of could be like a maybe like a sort of secret weapon in a way, for the bench unit in the playoffs. They're both proven guys, and it's going to be very curious to see what happens. Eric Gordon, you just mentioned him. I think he's entering. He's like he might be entering his 27th season. I mean, the guy's old, but the guy knows how to produce, right? I
Yep.
mean, he's been productive throughout his whole career. So he played a really good role for the Phoenix Suns last year off their bench. You mentioned Ricky Council. I'm not sure Council's ready just yet for a
Okay.
regular rotation spot, but I do believe mid-season, like just continuing to get the reps, he's going to be okay. And I also think Jared McCain actually might spend some time actually down here in Delaware.
Nice. That's good. That means not good for him, but it's good for me because I'll be jealous. I get to see him. So it's pretty cool. But listen, you make a good point about Drummond and Jackson because you hear, going from a baseball perspective, you hear Rob Thompson always talk about battle tested. He always says battle tested, right? When you get veterans that are battle tested, experienced, that understand the role, especially on a team that's in win now zone, right? This is win now territory. That's huge. I forgot how good they were in Detroit, to be honest with you.
Well, because it's Detroit, right? I mean, now listen, I'm a Michigan native, but it is Detroit at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So, I mean, look, I think now Drummond hasn't been past round one in the playoffs in his career, but he has been there. He's been to the playoffs. He knows what it's like, right? Jackson, obviously, he won that title with Denver in 2023. He was a huge part of that LA Clipper team, along with Paul George, that actually made the Western Conference Finals in 2021 when Kawhi Leonard went down. That's the only conference final team in Clippers history, actually, and
Wow.
and it was really Jackson and George leading the way. So the fact that you were able to have these guys on this roster now, it's important. And even Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin's another guy,
Yes.
a huge part of the Miami Heat in the last couple of years. Obviously, George is the headliner of this offseason, and as he should. We're talking about a borderline Hall of Famer and everything he's been able to accomplish. Paul George is fantastic. But I mean, these other guys I just mentioned, like they are, they're going to be just as important to this team's success.
Yeah, they really are. Again, we're speaking to Ky Carlin. Make sure you follow him at Ky Carlin, KY_Carlin. He does so much work for the 76ers as part of the USA Today network. And I'll tell you what you just said, makes me bring it back to when the trade goes down for Cat going to New York. And a lot of people were going, oh, they're panicking. Like this team's just getting better. I get it. But what we just talked about, we talked about 4 to 5 different pieces that we're excited about coming off the bench as depth. And I look at the Knicks, Kai, and I'm like, okay, besides their top 5 guys, they depleted everything to make these moves. And I don't know if they're in such good spot that everybody thinks they are.
Now, see, I think they're still in a terrific spot,
Okay.
but to your point, they did move both DiVincenzo and Randall, obviously, to get Cat, right? And before that move, I would have said the Knicks were like probably had the most depth in the Eastern Conference because if you think about it, their starting lineup last year that came to within a game of the conference finals was essentially going to be their bench unit like this
Wow.
upcoming season. But now that you moved because after they got Mikal Bridges, DiVincenzo and Josh Hart were going to be off the bench.
Yep.
Like you were going to have a lineup: Brunson, Bridges, OG Anunoby, Randall, and Mitchell Robinson before Robinson went down with the injury. But like that was your starting lineup, and obviously you lost Isaiah Hartenstein, and that's like a huge loss.
Yep.
But Jericho Sims seems like he was ready to take over that spot. Now though, you move DiVincenzo. Hart probably moves back into the lineup now. Now that Randall's part out of the equation, you probably go with Brunson, Bridges, Hart, Anunoby, and Towns, which is still a very strong lineup. And then you can still go to other pieces off your bench. Deuce McBride obviously killed the Sixers in the playoffs.
Yep.
Um,
The
so
legend.
and then Jericho Sims and Mitchell Robinson, when Robinson comes back, he's a force on the defensive end. So I think the top four teams in the East are still going to be Boston, Philly, New York, and I'm not forgetting about the Milwaukee Bucks. I know a lot of people are because Doc Rivers, I get it, but when you have Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, you can't forget about them.
No, you cannot. That's a great. I said to people all the time, like you can't forget, man. I'm sorry when teams have legends like that and Hall of Famers and MVPs, and you can't because you just never know when they're going to click. Now, last thing, I'll finish up on this. Just talk about. I'm not a prediction guy. I don't want to get into any of that. It's way too early. But just your sense, going into this year about you have Paul George, who's in his mid 30s, right? You have Joel Embiid, you want to keep healthy. Do you kind of get the sense that these guys are going to be rested a little more than they were last year, or do you think that we could just expect them to be playing all the time?
I think they're going to be rested a lot more, especially because like we didn't even get to Kyle Lowry yet. Kyle Lowry is going to be
Yeah.
39, I think, in March. So I don't think Lowry's going to play as huge of a role this year as he did last year when the Sixers picked him up. And Nick Nurse kind of mentioned that on media day that he really doesn't want Lowry playing as many minutes as he did. I think Lowry played 28.4 minutes a night after the Sixers picked him up. You can expect that number to probably be somewhere around like 15, honestly, because I mean Kyle Lowry is still very productive, and that guy deserves all the respect in the world. But I mean, obviously, he's getting up there in age. So I believe that a lot of these guys are probably going to be rested a lot throughout this whole season because, again, it is not going to matter what this team does from October to mid April. It is going to matter what they do at the end of April, heading into May and June, because that is going to be how the team is going to be judged. And for the first time, really, this is my eighth season. I'm actually getting ready to cover this team. This is the first time ever where I could be like, yeah, they should make the Eastern Conference Finals. Like I never felt it in years past, not even during the Jimmy Butler year. Like this is the year for me that if they're healthy, they should make the Eastern Conference Finals, and it shouldn't be an excuse really.
I love it. I love it, Kai. As always, let everybody know. I mean, I saw whether they can follow you obviously at KY_CARLIN. All your fantastic work. What do you got going on like the first 2 weeks of the season, man?
Really just kind of getting into the season. I mean, obviously they open up in Milwaukee, or excuse me, at home against Milwaukee. Then they go to Toronto and Indiana, and then they come home and they welcome Tobias Harris back to Philly on
Wow.
October 30th, and then I head out to LA for the return of Paul George to the Clippers, and then the LeBron James Lakers, and it's just like it's you just kind of head into the season like that.
Yeah, man. Listen, it's great. I love it. I'm gonna get you out on a really fun note here because I know I've seen you on Instagram dropping some trays, some threes from the 3 point line, right? So they just had three open tryouts for the Blue Coats. So I was wondering, man. I went down there on the one that was at Chase Fieldhouse. I was like, yo, I thought Kai was going to be down there trying out, man.
Absolutely not. I'm not in that nearly type of shape to be able to do any of that.
Hey man, you and me both. But you got a nice stroke. I watched it. You got a nice stroke, man. As always, though, man, we appreciate it. For joining us. And listen, man, February, end of January, February, I'll be back on Sirius every Sunday. So I'd love to reach out to you, see if you can get on, talk some NBA at night, and have some fun, man. I appreciate it.
I would love that. Appreciate it, Tony. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Have a great day, man.
Thanks, man.